So your ability to craft this story where people just listen and they're like, I'm going to ignore the metrics. I just want to give this person my money is really become the core competence. Now, where you get into trouble is the line between vision, exaggeration, and fraud gets thinner and thinner, right? Adam Newman exaggerated, Elizabeth Holmes lied.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, and this is the podcast built around one simple premise that everything today is a brand. Every person, every celebrity, every athlete, every product, every corporation, every movement is a branded set of values. And what we do here is two things. First, we do a big interview with a big personality. And today we're going to have Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU Stern Business, probably one of the most influential business thinkers today, best-selling author. We're going to talk brands. We're going to kind of talk where the world is going. He is one of the most fascinating guys out there. You're going to have to listen to this interview. He's really, really that special. And we also do what I call our brands of the week. And those are basically finding out which brands are moving the zeitgeist, who's up, who's down, who's going in which direction. And let's get right into it. Our first brand of the week is brand down for the odds of candidates winning the election. You know, I always like to say follow the money. And this is interesting, is unfortunately, according to the Las Vegas Review, Donald Trump's chances of being elected president in 2024 are the best since he left the White House. He leads the field of candidates with a 26% likelihood of winning. Smart markets rate Trump as a 70% chance to run again. It's interesting. President Joe Biden is given only a 15% chance of re-election, 1 in 6, which is incredibly low for a sitting president. And they say Trump has a 41% chance to win in 2024. So bad news on the Vegas betting odds for the Democrats. We're not surprised at this point. Obviously, there's a long time between now and 2024. But brand down for betting odds for president. Brand down for Trump TV. You know, he's got Trump Social, so now he wants to do Trump's media company, a pro-gun programming, cancel shows, no woke content for streaming services. Basically a Netflix of right-wing content, Trump-specific programming, a Netflix-style offering squarely pitched as MAGA followers, just what we need now. So a huge brand down for that. That'll be a failure like everything else he does. Let's now get into guns. Obviously, this is the first time I'm doing my show since the tragic shooting in Texas, 19 kids, 2 teachers. There's no words for it. I just, you know, I'm gonna, you know, we've all heard it, and it just, these fucking coward Republicans. Trump spoke at the NRA, brand down for the NRA, an ongoing brand down for NRA. Basically, what disgusts me is Trump read all the names of the little children that died and talked about the problem is mental health and the problem is broken families. And yeah, how about maybe the fucking problem is automatic weapons and background checks. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But brand down to the NRA and brand down to Trump. And there's, I wish I had something different to say than something you've already heard every which way. There's something wrong in our system right now that allows this to happen, that allows for 90% of Americans, 90% want background checks. 67% want a ban on assault weapons. There's no reason for assault weapons other than mass killings there. And any of this bullshit about it's protected in the Second Amendment, that's bullshit. You can't own a bazooka. You can't own a tank. The right to bear arms, yes, but it does not protect your right to bear weapons of war. Like I said, you can't have hand grenades. You can't have a bazooka. You can't have missile launchers. You shouldn't have AR-15 assault-style weapons. So I'm sick like everybody else is. And if I had a TV show now, every day I would be listing the 50 Republican senators who do nothing, putting their faces up there. Blood is on their hands. It just is. These are the people, 10 of them can change it. And they refuse to do it because they're cowards. And it's heartbreaking. Some more brand down for gun stats in America. There are 120 guns for every 100 Americans. Think about that. There's more guns than people in this country. About 44% of U.S. adults live in a household with a gun. In 2018, gun makers produced 9 million firearms in this country, more than double that amount of manufactured in 2008. Just frightening. U.S. has the highest firearm homicide in the developed world. The number of U.S. deaths from gun violence was about 4 per 100,000 people, 18 times the average rate in other developed countries. There are more, has become the number one cause of death for American kids. It's just, I can go on with the stats, but we are like no other civilized country in this world, the way we handle guns and the situation with guns and how guns are part of the American brand. And once again, the right to bear arms, absolutely. Second Amendment, absolutely. Nobody's questioning that. But you also can't use free speech, but you can't yell fire at a movie theater. So it's just disgusting. And it's just, as I said, 84% strongly or somewhat support preventing sales of all firearms. People reported as dangerous to law enforcement. I said the 67% banning assault weapons. 75% strongly or somewhat support creating a national database with each gun sale, and 18% strongly or somewhat opposes. So in all my years of covering politics, I've never seen the numbers so stacked in a direction for what these people want. And this is democracy. And we have leaders that are just ignoring forget ignoring common sense and forget ignoring protecting our children, ignoring what 90% of this country wants. And there's something fucking wrong with that. All right, let's move off of guns. I guess that's a problem. I say let's move off of guns because that's what happens. We go through this and there's days or weeks of outrage and then the parade moves on and it happens again and we go, how can this happen again? And something's got to change. Something's just got to fucking change. Okay, let's move on. Millennial workers. Millennials brand up are driving the remote work push. An overwhelming majority of Americans, 77% whose job can be done remotely, say it's important their employer allow them to work remotely. They want to, according to a New Harris poll. Survey finds that over half workers say they are likely to switch to a hybrid or remote job to work more flexibly. So we've talked a lot about this on this show. It's if you want to keep workers, you're going to have to give them remote opportunities. I'm against it, but lucky I'm not running a country anymore. I'm not running a company anymore. Lucky for employees. Lucky for me because I'd have trouble keeping people. Brand down for big cities. Saw population declines during the pandemic. More than half of the country's 15 largest cities saw population decreases during the coronavirus. The switch to remote work during the pandemic enabled many people to leave cities. New York remains the nation's largest city in its population by more than 305,000 people, but they've lost by 305,000 people in the pandemic, 3.5% of its population. LA lost 40,000 people, roughly 1% of its population. So people leaving the cities. Brand up for babies. U.S. births increased for the first time since 2014. They increased the first time in 7 years. American women had about 3.66 million babies in 2021, up 1%. The rebound spanned age groups with birth rates raising for every cohort of women aged 25 and older. So babies, brand up for babies. Brand up for Pepsi. And they're leaving the Super Bowl halftime show. And I think that's smart. I think that's a waste of money. Supposedly it's $50 million. And if I was right now in charge of Pepsi and you said, okay, you need to get more Pepsi drinkers, I could spend $50 million a lot more effectively than the Pepsi halftime show. I don't think one person's drinking one more Pepsi because they sponsor a halftime show. The stars of the show are obviously the acts. Last year we had a great one. We had great ones with Mary J. Blige and Snoop Dogg and Eminem and 50 Cent. But I always wonder these sponsoring of a halftime show or something like that, where you get your name, and the name is mentioned, obviously, many, many times, and your logo's up there. But I think in this very targeted world today of social media and options to reach consumers, I give them a brand up for walking away from it. Super Bowl's not going to be happy with me. Brand up for the NBA Finals. Old dynasty, new dynasty. We've got the new dynasty, the Warriors, against the old dynasty, the Celtics. If you wagered $1 on the Celtics at the beginning of this year to win the finals, they were 50-1 odds. It's incredible. And that's the biggest odds of any team to ever reach the finals. So that's pretty incredible. It's going to be a great series. I'm very psyched for it. It starts, this breaks Thursday, so it starts tonight on Thursday. It's going to be a great series. I am going to be rooting for Golden State. Although I like the guys in Boston. I like Tatum. I like Brown. I like Marcus Smart. I like Al Horford. But I can never root for Boston. If you're in New York, you can't root for Boston in anything. It's just one of those things. You can't root for the Patriots. You can't root for the Celtics. You can't root for the Red Sox. So I will be rooting for the Dubs. By the way, tickets for the Warriors, the Celtics' first game. On Ticketmaster, game one courtside seats were valued at $59,000. SeatGeek's prices were $30,000 and StubHub's were $41,000. So anywhere between 30 and 60,000 for a courtside seat. It's a lot of money for courtside seats. The last time these two teams met was Bill Russell against Will Chamberlain. There you go. Brand up for Justin Timberlake. He's selling his catalog to a fund backed by Blackstone for $100 million. Songs include Cry Me a River, Sexy Back, Can't Stop the Feeling. He's going to own all his hits going forward, new ones. In December, Bruce Springsteen sold his catalog to Sony for $550 million. So it's a nice payday for these guys to sell their catalog, and good for them. Brand up, I've talked about it for weeks to come. I predicted it, Top Gun Maverick. Huge monster weekend, $150 million at the box office. And what was interesting, that's just domestically, it was Tom Cruise's biggest debut movie. And he had older audiences there, guys like me. I went over the weekend. I just had to go see it, and it's great. If you like Top Gun, it's just, there are very few things you get to kind of relive again, and that were part of your youth or culture. I guess when Top Gun came out, I was around 29, 28, something like that. And I've watched it over the years like everybody else has, but to just kind of go revisit the characters, or a couple of the characters at least. Val Kilmer's got a cameo in there. Miles Teller plays Goose's son. But brand up for Top Gun Maverick. It's going to continue to do monster numbers. This is a great one. Brand up for Winnie the Pooh. All of a sudden now Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain, which means you don't have to buy the right. At a certain point in time, if somebody doesn't own the rights or something's in the public domain, anybody can use it for anything. You don't have to pay for the rights of Winnie the Pooh. So what do we have now? We have Winnie the Pooh Goes Slasher. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. They wrap production, and the first still shows a demonic Pooh and Piglet about to pounce on a scantily clad young woman relaxing in a hot tub. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, see Pooh and Piglet as the main villains going on a rampage after being abandoned by a college-bound Christopher Robin. I think this is genius. Winnie the Pooh and Piglet in a slasher movie as the villains. I mean, somebody's got their thinking cap on there, so I give that a big brand up. Brand out for New York payphones. The last one. Last public payphone said their goodbyes this week from a Wagon area. It's one of those things that disappear and you go, huh? Oh, yeah, wait, no more payphones. They were pretty gross anyway. You'd pick them up. There was always some liquid on the ear. I mean, just people, God knows what they were doing to those payphones. But they were part of New York, and I'm sad to see them go. Brand up for minivans. It's hot. Minivans are back. People used to make fun of them. The average price of new minivans as a category was up 43% nationwide from the first quarter of 2022 versus 2017. Obviously, the prices of everything is up. Minivans has gotten hot. People used to make fun of them, and now they're cool. There's a lot of kind of cool style minivans. Prices for 3-year-old Dodge Grand Caravans were up 64% from the quarter earlier. Minivans making a comeback. I always thought cool minivans would be cool, and I think they're starting to make some of them now. Brand up for grocery stores. Grocery brands are surging in popularity. The Axios Harris Poll 100 is an annual survey to gauge the reputations of the most visible brands in America. And this year, for the first time in its 6-year history, 3 grocery brands, Trader Joe's, H-E-B, and Wegmans, landed in the poll's top 10. It's interesting how people are putting grocery stores rank highly, both amongst Democrats and Republicans. And Trader Joe's ranks in the top 10 companies among Democrats and Republicans alike also. So grocery stores, people are liking them. They're feeling pretty good about them. Interesting. Here's one. Brand down for Steakum sheets. That's it. Sheets that smell like Steakum. Picture this. Your nostrils quiver. I'm just reading this from something. Quiver as the swaddling scent of a home-cooked dinner wafts into your sensory space. Perhaps a home-cooked steak or a mom's beef stroganoff. You inhale that savory, seductive smell and open your eyes not to find a steaming plate of meat, but a set of beef-scented sheets. There you go. The queen-size linen is designed with the likeness of a meat, an extremely relaxing pattern of moist textured shades of brown, and are scented like the brand's signature product. An infomercial-like demo for the set, which includes a fitted sheet, top sheet, and 2 pillowcases. Details features an extremely low thread crown. The setup is available for purchase of $49.99 with the promo code BEEFCurious. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you're looking to, create a sexy environment, I'm just not sure how beef-scented sheets are doing that. I don't want to know. I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. Everybody's got their thing. Everybody's got their fetishes. But I can't see, honey, Wow, that smells good. Is that a rib roast or is that a T-bone? There you go. Walmart drones, brand up. Walmart announces same-day drone delivery service in 6 states. Think about this. There it is. There's your loaf of bread hovering up above. It's here. The future is here. You've been working hard on a new drone delivery system available in select cities. We learned that Walmart will officially expand the same-day drone delivery service to 6 states, serving nearly 4 million people. Phoenix, Tampa, Orlando, Salt Lake. Basically, you can order something anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and get it delivered by drone in under 2 hours for only $3.99. Customers can order anything from batteries, toilet paper, diapers, or even hot dog buns and have them delivered. I just don't know how this is safe up in the air with planes and things flying around. And I don't want to see a box of Pampers flying through the air. So sometimes, I mean, this is a great advancement. You get something delivered by 2 hours in a drone, but I don't know, man. Sometimes we're going a little too fast. That just sounds like an old guy. Here's a good one. A New York government robots, brand up for them. This is a nice thing. The state of New York will distribute robot companions to the homes of more than 800 older adults. The robots are not able to help with physical tasks, but function as more proactive versions of digital assistants like Siri or Alexa. They engage users in small talk, helping contact loved ones, and keeping track of health goals like exercise, medication. It's meant to help address the growing problem of social isolation among the elderly. It's really nice. I think that's a great idea. And that's robots doing the right thing, not when you're seeing all these movies where robots take over and destroy mankind. I think that's helping mankind. Brand up for Arby's. This is an interesting one. Arby's is selling a burger for the first time. Who would have thunk? That's right. Arby's is always roast beef and all kinds of meat. They're finally selling the Wagyu Steakhouse burger. Of course, $5.99. I love Arby's. I think that's great. Great news there. And finally, brand up for TikTok pet influencers. The richest animals on TikTok pet influencers make up $26,000 per post. All About Cats released their earnings of the app's animal accounts Friday. The top of the leaderboard, that little puff, a furry gray kitty, estimated to earn over $26,000 a post. With 27 million followers and over 500 million likes, the cat, with the help of crafty edits by humans, tests recipes and life hacks posted by other users. The number 2 spot is Jeff Palm, a puffy-headed Pomeranian with a full wardrobe. The end of civilization as we know it. And those are brands of the week. Let's get to my interview with Professor Scott Galloway. You're going to really, this is a brilliant mind. And please trust me, listen to this interview. I want to talk to you about Freshly. If you want fast, healthy, great food delivered to your home, if you want to save time, you don't like fast food, you don't want to cook when you get home, but you want healthy, fantastic food, I want to talk to you about Freshly. Food that's fast doesn't have to be fast food. It offers quality meals without the hard work. The meals are designated by nutritionists, cooked by chefs, and then delivered fresh. Other meal deliveries need to be prepped and cooked, but Freshly is ready to eat in 3 minutes. You get the meals that are completely made, you just pop them in 3 minutes. White bean turkey chili bowl, home-style chicken, steak peppercorn. It's delicious chef-made, nutrient-packed meals delivered straight to your door, no cooking required, fresh and never frozen, ready to heat and enjoy in just 3 minutes. Use the Freshly website or app to find meals that fit your lifestyle. Choose from over 50 nutritionist-designed entrees, like their classic steak peppercorn, multi-serve sides, like their massive mac and cheese, and a new line of plant-based meals. Skip the grocery shopping and dirty dishes. Your meals arrive cooked and fresh every week. Stop stressing about dinner right now. Freshly is offering our listeners, this is a good deal, $125 off your first 5 orders when you go to freshly.com/Donny. That's $125 off freshly.com/Donny. That's $125 off at freshly.com/Donny. I want to talk to you about Chime Credit Builder. Is the piece of plastic in your wallet doing enough for you? Because with the secured Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card, you can start building credit with everyday purchases and on-time payments. You see, with Credit Builder, members can increase their credit history with no annual fees or interest. And having a good credit score can mean getting better car loan rates or renting apartments easier or just bragging rights around the dinner table. This is a really, really smart thing, I'm telling you. You want Chime Credit Builder. It continue credit journey with Chime. Sign up takes only 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started on chime.com/Donny. That's chime.com/Donny. The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by Stride Bank N.A. pursuant to a license from Visa USA, Chime checking account, and $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply for the secure Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. Regular on-time payment history can have a positive effect on your credit score. Impact the score may vary, and some users' scores may not improve. If the piece in your plastic in your wallet is not doing enough for you, Chime Credit Builder. Get started at chime.com/Donny. That's chime.com/Donny. Sign up takes only 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/Donny. That's chime.com/Donny. I am thrilled that today's guest, Professor Scott Galloway, one of the most influential business thought leaders in the world. I think his goal, I've read somewhere, is to be the most influential thought leader in the business world.
Still time, Donnie.
Still
There's
time.
Still time.
Well, it's a journey, as they say. He is co-host of the magnificent podcast Pivot with my friend Kara Swisher. He's written 3 books. We're going to talk a lot about them today, specifically the 4, the hidden DNA of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, as we watch the market crash around us. He started 10 businesses. He's got an incredibly successful newsletter. He is a Renaissance man, a big thinker. And I'm thrilled to have you here today, man. Appreciate it.
Donnie, thanks. I appreciate the warm introduction.
So as we watch, we're in the middle of a market. We can call it a correction if we want to use the nice words, or we can call it a meltdown if we want to get a little bit more into hyperbole. Give me your take on what's going on as we sit here today, watching the market off almost 20% this year, and prognosticators saying this is just the beginning and there's more to come.
Yeah, the honest answer is I don't know what's happening here. I don't think I know any less or any more than anybody else. I was a graduate student instructor in macroeconomics for Christina Romer at Berkeley when I was in graduate school. And there was just some truisms of economic history. The first is you can't tame this type of inflation without raising interest rates pretty aggressively. You can't raise interest rates this aggressively without going into recession. And then you have these growthy stocks. A lot of these stocks, if you looked at them right now and you didn't know that they were off 70%, you would look at them now at traditional metrics and they don't look cheap even now.
Yeah.
I mean, Tesla's still trading at 20 times revenues and BMW trades at 1 in terms of enterprise value to revenue. So I think there's some real opportunities here. The only advice I would give to anybody is don't trust your emotions when there's market swings like this. That you want to be diversified, and great investors, it's more about temperament than it is about your ability to trade the market. I don't think anyone can time the markets. I certainly can.
Yeah.
The part that I think is really dangerous or could go down really dramatically is if you think about crypto's real advantage in the market was because it has no underlying cash flows usually, it doesn't have the gravity. Like if Bitcoin is up 13-fold, which it is in the last 5 years, even after this drawdown, there's no reason. People don't have a reason not to think it won't go up double because it has no underlying earnings to benchmark it against peers. So it has no gravity. At the same time, going down, it has no. At some point, Apple and Facebook just begin to look cheap and people move in. Value investors move in. And sometimes when something's trading at single digits, multiple on earnings, people will move in and start buying it. But technically, there's no ceiling and no floor on crypto. And in a negative sentiment market like this, I think that's the part of the market that could see the greatest volatility. I'm curious to get your thoughts, Donnie. I think it was kind of a blather there.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a blather at all. Look, I'm 64, so I've lived through a lot. What's scarier about this particular moment in the market than when I go back to 2008 or if I go back to the beginning of the pandemic, you had the government working for you. You had market, really serious situations in the market, but you had the government. As to your point now, we're just going to be staring at more higher interest rates coming through, and we know what that does. So I think we're still in for a lot of pain. And I think that it's, I don't think we've gotten into the fear factor yet where, to your point, temperament does take over for a lot of investors and the pain just gets too much. So, I don't, it is what it is. But I've never, and the more I read, the more I've never seen so many people so down on things and just where we are, just because we're coming off, such a sugar high for so long. It is, I think there's more pain to come, but it is what it is. And the scary part, when you think about it, you talked about this, that you've got, 7 companies that make up 50% of the S&P. And when you have a situation like that and you have something that's so bloated up top, you fall faster. We saw Facebook lose, 30% of their value after one earnings call or whatever the hell it was, 20%. And that's
Mhm.
scary stuff. And I know you talk a lot about the big four. We'll take Netflix out of it and call it the big four. And you're actually very short on the future of Facebook. I'm not talking about it as a stock, that you've said that strategically it's the right move what Zuckerberg is doing, moving to Meta, because Facebook is just kind of a bloated empire at this point. But you still see not great things ahead for Facebook.
There's some emotion here, which is always dangerous in terms of protecting the actions of a company, because my emotions take over. I think Facebook is a mendacious company. I think we're net gainers from big tech. There's some externalities we need to address, but if we could push a button and do away with big tech, I don't think we'd want to push that button. And I think the majority of nations would take all of these companies with all of their problems and say, sure, relocate to Stockholm or to Cape Town. We'd love to have you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's true of Facebook. I think Facebook is actually a net negative. If you look at when social went on mobile, we've seen just undeniable increases in depression among teens, especially among teen girls. I think they're the brightest people. Their greatest effort at the most senior levels around delay and obfuscation from the damage they cause, as opposed to trying to address those issues. So I have some bias against Facebook. Now, having said that, if I really wanted to hurt Facebook, I don't think I could have in my wildest dreams come up with a better, more effective plan than what I refer to as the Oculus, which will be the greatest tech hardware failure of the last decade. 40 to 70% of people who put on an Oculus, which is Mark Zuckerberg's big push into the metaverse, report feeling nauseous. And today they announced, ironically, that they're cutting costs at Reality Labs. They're spending around $2 or $3 billion a quarter to try and make this transition to the metaverse. So I think Mark Zuckerberg's fever dreams of moving to the metaverse are dead on arrival already. They sold, I think, 5 or 7 million units of Oculus last quarter. Last year, we sold 70 million pairs of Crocs. You sell 5 to 10 times more game sets. I think the portal, if you will, Oculus is a portal into the metaverse. And the majority of my knowledge around the metaverse comes from Disney Plus's series Loki. But you need a seamless portal into other 3D dimension or 3D renderings of the web, which is kind of what the metaverse is. And the portal that everybody has, and is the most underhyped product to the most overhyped product of Oculus, the most underhyped technology hardware product is Apple's AirPods, which if they were a standalone company would be a Fortune 200 business just behind MasterCard, just ahead of Estee Lauder. So I think as much as Facebook is going to do a face plan around the metaverse, I actually think Apple is kind of the unknown toll booth that no one's talking about in terms of the metaverse. So I'm very bearish on Facebook. At these price levels, it's actually probably, you could argue, a decent buy because it's still an incredible business. But Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the metaverse, I think, is dead on arrival.
And how are we feeling about Bezos and Amazon these days?
I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to pull a Howard Schultz and come in as the White Knight and return to Amazon. If Amazon goes below $2,000 a share, which will be about $1 trillion, I think there's a decent argument that AWS is worth more than the entire company. So I think one of two things will happen in the next 12 months if the stock continues its decline. One, Bezos will come back in, because the thing about Bezos, his superpower is storytelling. In addition to being a great operator, he can get on an earnings call in the face of declining revenues and say, we're going to continue to massively invest in this key area and play offense when everyone's playing defense. And the market just loves his story, his demeanor, his leadership. I don't think Andy Jassy brings that kind of storytelling capability. I mean, you're going to forget more than I'm ever going to know about storytelling and branding, but there's just few people in business history who can weave a narrative more credibly and get your greed glands going like Jeff Bezos. He's the guy that shows up and says, investors, sit down, and then he talks about how he's going to have the first vaccinated supply chain, and they're doubling down on PPE and protocols to make sure that everything ships in 48 hours despite a raging pandemic, but it's going to take losses way down, and everyone bids the stock price up. And they don't have that mojo right now.
Yeah.
And then AWS, my prediction is AWS is the most valuable company in the world by 2025 after Amazon spins it. It's the fastest growing, most profitable part of technology, the cloud, and the biggest, kind of best run cloud company in the world is now stuck within an e-commerce company called Amazon. So either Bezos comes back or they spin AWS.
It's interesting you talk about storytelling, and you've said that an entrepreneurship is about really selling and telling a story, and that's what the best entrepreneurs do. And that it's not, you separate that from people who are liars, that at the beginning of any enterprise, you're spinning a story, you believe it, you're not quite sure how you got there, but you have to have that wonderment and that almost delusional ability to tell a story. And it's not lying. It's just that ability to weave a story that you believe in your gut, and it may or may not be true, but it certainly feels right.
Yeah, look, that's what entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. So am I. Entrepreneur is synonym for salesperson. You're constantly selling all the time. If you want to be an entrepreneur, that means you have a greater tolerance for risk. You don't mind the prospect of public failure. When you start a company and it fails, and I've done this, it's really fucking embarrassing.
Yeah.
You feel stupid. You feel like it's an indictment on you personally. And most people are not willing to take that sort of risk around public failure. But what it really means is you got to be selling all the time. You're selling clients, you're selling investors, you're selling employees. You're just constantly selling everybody. And the way you sell, the way you convince people to join your firm, invest in you, is by crafting a narrative that's really compelling. And the kind of core competence of these growthy stocks was that in their kind of initial stages, they had this vision that was so compelling that they could attract so much cheap capital that they were able to build out a fulfillment infrastructure that made FedExes look amateur, that they were able to make so much, invest so much in original content that they kind of aggregated 250 million consumers, subscribers. That's Netflix. So your ability to craft this story where people just listen and they're like, I'm going to ignore the metrics. I just want to give this person my money is really become the core competence. Now, where you get into trouble is the line between vision, exaggeration, and fraud gets thinner and thinner, right? Adam Newman exaggerated, Elizabeth Holmes lied.
You called the one on Adam Newman. You were one of the early guys to say, whoa, something doesn't smell right here.
Well, if you pull cheap capital helps you pull the future forward. But what future are you pulling forward? Even with Amazon, they had positive margins. When they sold a product, $1 worth of goods on Amazon.com, they got to keep 17 or 20 cents. With WeWork, it was every time they sold $1, it was costing them $1.40. They were flying 2 Bombardier Global 500 Expresses into a mountain every week. And the thing is, as they scaled, they were only going to scale their losses. Yeah. So the business never made any sense whatsoever. That was an easy call. That was leveraging this unique insight called math to say, okay, say they do double or triple their revenues. That just means they're going to double or triple their losses. But storytelling has become the leaders of today's internet companies all have one thing in common. They speak, and you're willing to just enter into consensual hallucination with them that if you give them enough money for long enough, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, that seems as if that kind of blitzkrieg strategy, which was kind of vogue for a little while in Silicon Valley, is WeWork showed that just buying market share is certainly not the answer. It's worked for some companies, but it certainly didn't work for them. I want to just shift for a second. You lecture on brand strategy and digital marketing. How do you define a brand?
I think of the intangible associations surrounding a group of products or services. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to emotion, something that beyond the product or the usage makes me feel something, makes me feel closer to God, makes me feel more attractive to mates, makes me feel like a better man, a better mom. It triggers some sort of emotion that results in irrational decisions to get me additional margin that are unearned.
Yeah, I define it as a set of a value system that a product assigns to itself, that you as a consumer kind of vote and say, I line up with those values, that there's something in those values that, to your point, stimulates something in me or moves me, teaches me something, makes me feel a certain way, that is a value system. And that's the way I've always kind of looked at it. Do you go on the whole premise of this podcast is that everything and everybody today is a brand. Basically, if you've got a Facebook page or an Instagram page, you're a brand because you're putting out there your value system, what it looks like, what it feels like, what you believe in, what you want to project about yourself. And am I oversimplifying by saying that everything today is a brand?
No, anytime you have anytime you think of something without using it, it's technically brand. I mean, I like your definition better than mine, and that's why you built a $500 million business and I built a $20 million brand strategy firm.
I think you've done okay.
So, but when you think about it, what I think is interesting in our world is generally speaking, from kind of end of World War II, and this was my wrap, to the introduction of Google, the primary algorithm for creating a shit ton of shareholder value was take a mediocre product, a mediocre shoe, salty snack, beer, mediocre car out of Detroit, and wrap these amazing brand codes of toughness, masculinity, patriotism around it, and then pound away at those associations, leveraging creative people like yourself in across what was something we didn't realize, that it was on sale and that it was the cheapest, most efficient medium in the world, and that's broadcast. You got 5 times the viewership in the Academy Awards for a third of the price. So it's either 15 times too expensive now or it was 15 times too inexpensive then. And then stuff the channel with it and print money. And then Google came along and said, all right, brand used to be the weapon of diligence. Now Google is the weapon of diligence, or TripAdvisor, your social graph. And the example I use is I'm going to London next week. I almost always stay at the Mandarin Oriental or the Four Seasons. We're used to, because someone else is paying, and B, because they always deliver an 8. Those brands are solid. Those brands mean we're going to deliver a solid 8. We're going to do a good job. But in the last few years, I used my social graph and TripAdvisor to find, no, I want to stay at the Continent, or I want to stay at Chilton. I like to hang out with people younger and better looking than me. That's my primary criteria when I travel. And I find out through my social graph that there's these little boutique hotels in different cities that offer that. And so my new weapons of diligence are no longer just the brand. They're social, they're Google, and this era of sort of the intangible, this Mad Men era, is kind of, the sun has passed midday on it. And it's not to say brands aren't any less powerful. It's just that they're being built through innovation, supply chain. Amazon and Apple, their victory in brands have been forward integrating into stores and creating Amazon Prime. So it's sort of, I feel as if what I've been teaching, if I'm not careful, is essentially I teach kids, I train them to go to General Foods as a brand manager and be laid off 2 or 3 years. I think the era of traditional brand building.
You and I are old guys at General Foods.
Yeah, remember them?
But that's when I started out, when I came out of school, the best thing you could do was be a brand manager at Procter & Gamble or General Foods. I mean, that was the pedigree that you went for.
Yeah,
and it's just, it seems so quaint and antiquated now.
Yeah, it seems passé now.
You are a believer in NFTs, that you're very bullish on where the world is headed. There's not a day that goes by someone says, explain NFTs to me. And, talk to me why you feel so strong that it's here to stay in a meaningful way.
So I'm fascinated. So I think Web3 is just branding. I don't think this whole notion of decentralization is all just marketing. It's Web 2.001, and there's some innovation there around coins or tokens. I think beyond Ethereum and Bitcoin, it's just Keno, which is speculative. I think most of them are going to zero. DAOs are really interesting, this idea of a decentralized mechanism for raising money and governance. I think that's really interesting. I'm bullish on NFTs because I think everything comes back to instinct. And most powerful instinct is survival. 99% of Americans wake up every morning and think, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to survive, which takes us to the second most powerful instinct, which is propagation. And I think we spend a ton of money. Show me an irrational consumer product, and I'll show you something that you think makes you more attractive to the opposite sex. Even if you're in a monogamous relationship, we're just so hardwired to try and be more attractive to the opposite sex such that we can punch up an evolutionary.
I've always believed that everything comes back to that. Every accumulation of power and money and status comes back to that very primal thing that's so interesting.
Look, if we stop having babies or we start mating with people less attractive and less intelligent and less smart than us, the species eventually gets dumber and stupider and goes away. So this is a very powerful instinct, wanting to feel powerful, wanting to feel. The reason why I wear my AirPods around is I think it says I'm one of the billion wealthiest people in the world, iOS users. I'm elegant, I'm sophisticated, I'm into technology, I'm a good storyteller, have sex with me. The reason I have a Tesla is it says I care about the earth, yet I'm a fucking baller, have sex with me.
Right.
And so you effectively have with NFTs are signaling. People used to date and mate offline. Now, post-COVID, the majority of relationships, and we'll see if it lasts, are starting online. So we used to signal our worth as a mate offline with a Rolex or ordering 1942 in a club or having a Ferrari. Now we signal online. And the way we signal, I think, online is going to be increasingly through NFTs. And we have a generation of kids coming of age who don't think it's ridiculous to spend money for a skin on Fortnite, which communicates to their friends that they're cool and they have money and they're powerful. So I think NFTs are going to be the new online signaling. in terms of our value, our kind of our potential as a mate online. So I'm actually quite bullish on NFTs. And if the way we signal, a lot of my friends, when if they come into money, they start buying art because I think they think it signals that they're an interesting, sophisticated person.
Yeah, that was just call me one of those idiots. Exactly.
Well, art's outperformed every asset class. But
it really, I never bought it for that reason, but I've collected art, and it's the one thing that just keeps going up. It's interesting.
Yeah, it just keeps going up. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's basically a bet on the top 1% who just continue to kill it. But anyways, the ability to signal, I think if Ferrari and Chanel and Hermes can figure out a way to wrap their arms around the intellectual property rights such that if you want to have a Ferrari parked outside your house in the metaverse, if you want to have a Chanel coin or a Chanel logo on your Twitter profile, if they can figure out a way, or you want to say, I own the NFT for this artist, I don't think that's any stranger than when I buy a Grayson Perry that's signed one of 300 and I own it. Now, the consumption is a little bit different, but I'm bullish on NFTs because I think signaling is moving online just as mating is moving online.
It's just this simple premise of I want the best pelt that I can show off, and it just comes in a different form now. It's very, very simple.
That's exactly right.
You mentioned young people. I'm a believer that this new hybrid model, the work at home, the flexible work that's kind of so accelerated post-pandemic, I worry about not having mentoring in the workplace. That it's just that there's people not going back to work. I went into my old ad agency to visit the CEO, and I think the New York office has about 300 people, and there were 25 people there. And I remembered so much, and I might be dating myself, so much about the energy of a workplace and what happened there and the collaboration and the human cues that happen. And I worry that we're losing a lot now. Obviously, as employees have more and more power and just say, no, I'm only working 2 days a week in the office, or I'm not coming to the office at all. I'm curious, as you spend your time with young people now, how do you feel about that?
Well, like you, I speak to a lot of CEOs. I'd say the number one question right now, it used to be about something tech related. The number one question you get most from leadership in companies now is this notion of remote work. How do they handle it? What's the approach? What are the upsides, the downsides? I think we have a tendency to look at things as 0 or 1. We're either, kind of the David Solomon or Jamie Dimon. Everyone's in the work, back to work, same as it always was. Or you can't work here. Or there's, we're going all remote. And I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I don't think we're going to be in the office as much, but I think that the world is headed towards more where Apple is. And Apple is kind of suggesting aggressively that you need to be in the office kind of 2 to 3 plus days a week. Now, the advice I give to young people is get in the office as much as you can before you start collecting spouses and dogs, because your trajectory and your income is a function of proximity. What do I mean by that? Every promotion, if there's a vice president position opens up, there are 2 or 3 people who are qualified for that promotion. The person who gets it will be the person who has the best relationship with the decider. And relationships are a function of proximity. When you get a mentor, you get someone who's invested in your success. When you start asking them questions and being vulnerable to you or being vulnerable to them, they start getting invested in your success. It is not easy to acquire or provide mentorship over Zoom.
Yeah.
So what I say to young people is, look, be clear. If you want to move to Boulder, Colorado and ski in the afternoons, fine. You're going to make less money. So while you can afford to and while you can live in a shitty apartment in Brooklyn or wherever, Gowanus, and get into the office every goddamn day as a young person, if you are economically really motivated, get into the office every day. Go through the pain of putting on a pantsuit or a suit, blow drying your hair, getting on, the J train and getting in. What I say to leaders is, I think you should just be honest with people. I think you need to say, look, if you need to be at home a certain number of days a week, we understand. And there are certain people, mostly women, who are the caregivers, who really value the flexibility. And to shut that off is to ignore this incredible workforce of young people who have come to expect the flexibility around temporary work. But I'd also be honest with them. I'd say, bottom line, there's a place for you here if you're an outstanding sole contributor and you want to be remote some or most of the time. You're going to make less money. You're not going to progress as fast because it's a pain in the ass to get into the office, but there's an electricity and an energy and a value to it, and you're just more likely to make more money. So I think it's a hybrid, Donny, but I think we should all be honest with each other. It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. Yeah, it's great to work from home, and guess what? You're not going to make as much money.
You mentioned women. Now 60% of graduates are women. I've written a couple books, and one of my chapters in one of my books is that I believe that women are superior to men in business. If you give me this, and I built my company, 7 of my 9 senior partners were women, and this is before it was vogue to be doing that. And I found that women, if you give me a man and a woman of the same exact, if you could do a little science experiment and say that here's the exact same brains and drive and blah, 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 that I found almost without exception that I was spent much more time managing men's sense of their own self. How big is their office? How big is their paycheck? How big is their dick? How big is everything? Whereas women, and this is a generalization, were more collaborative. And it wasn't as much of a zero-sum game about what you're gaining versus what I'm losing. Have you have any feelings about that? I always say, give me a woman every single time over a man.
So a lot there. So you and I are cut from the same cloth here. Every one of my CEOs, every one of my partners, with the exception of one, has either been LGBTQ or a woman. Mm-hmm. And there's data that shows for young women, in terms of the things we value in information economy companies, women are outperforming men on every metric. 7 of 10 high school valedictorians are girls. It's not even 60-40 college grads. The more important number we don't talk about is it's 66-33. I'm sorry, college admissions, college students is 60-40 female to male, but it's 66-33 female college graduates. For every one male college graduate in the next 5 years, there's going to be 2 female college graduates. I'm sure you deal with the same firms I deal with, the Goldmans and the Googles of the world. If you talk to anyone under the age of 30, it's a woman.
Yeah.
So the behaviors, the ability to delay gratification, the discipline, the maturity they show, they just mature earlier. Testosterone encourages risk-taking and aggression and violence. And in some instances, that's warranted. We want some of that big dick energy among Ukrainian soldiers right now. And while it's easy to fall into the very accepted narrative of women are better on every level, every time, Donny, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that part of your success was that you brought together some peanut butter and chocolate of very male attributes that you brought and very female attributes.
Amen.
Neither is better, but 1 + 1 = 3. You brought some of that bravado, reckless, obnoxious, grasping beyond your reach. And let's be honest, it's fine as an academic, as anybody, to say that it's kind of the Simpson strategy of the world. Homer, all men are dopes, but trying to overcome their problems, but have a decent heart. And all women are just amazing on every level. I think it infantilizes women. I think it creates expectations that are unreasonable. And quite frankly, it's just not true. There are some attributes around masculinity, around the way the male brain works, that are very important for business and are very productive. We find some of those things off-putting, but in sum, I agree with you that women are outperforming men. I think that one of the existential crises in America over the next 10 years is failing young men. But we all want to talk about how women outperform men in the workplace and they're better. Yeah, on some levels. But the most successful companies bring together that peanut butter and chocolate, because there's also some fantastic attributes that what I'll call more male attributes bring to the workplace.
You nailed it at my company. That was it. And I knew I had those certain attributes, and I was surrounding myself with the other attributes. And it was that. And it was interesting. When I got airlifted out of there, it wasn't as successful anymore because the model, that kind of male-female dynamic model, didn't exist as much anymore. It's interesting you had that insight. You also have a great front row seat as being a professor, is that you watch every year, every decade, young people come through. If I was going to ask you mindset of young people today sitting at Stern versus 20 years ago, it's hard to kind of make one blanket statement, but okay. I used to sit out and look at 30 or 40 or 60 or 200 students in a lecture, and the net I was taking away from them was X. Now, 20 years later, with the generation turnover, where's the net? How we've moved forward, how we've moved backwards? I know it's a very tough kind of overall assessment, but just what comes to your mind as I throw that out there?
So there's a lot there. I'll give you some top-line observations. I teach, keep in mind, I call them my kids. Their average age is 28. I teach second-year MBAs. So they're adults.
But they're young people. They're still people with most in front of them. Yeah.
But half of them I'll teach part-time. A lot of them are at Goldman or at Google or at Salesforce. These are accomplished professionals, and they're tracking. They're freakishly remarkable. If you're at a top 20 business school, you're kind of freakishly remarkable, or your parents are freakishly rich. And those are the two cohorts that succeed in America. And every year, the kids get more impressive, smarter, harder working, more socially conscious. Every year, they get more impressive. And people have this kind of cynical trope around how expectant they are. I find these kids are I'm just absolutely inspired and blown away by how smart, how thoughtful, how civic-minded they are. Where I see some danger, if you will, is in the undergrads. And that is, I think wealthy parents, such as the two of us, spend so much time using sanitary wipes on our kids' lives that they don't develop their own immunities.
Yeah.
And then you couple that with social media, which maybe makes them have unreasonable expectations around their looks or the wealth they should attain. And you couple all this and they get to college and they get their heart broken or they get their first C and they literally can't handle it. And what's happened in high school and colleges was, I remember I just went back to my high school. Every week, I don't know, I went to a big public high school. It felt like every week there was a memorial for a kid who died in a drunk driving accident. It was drunkenness that was killing us. We had cars with no airbags. We'd go out, we'd get ridiculously fucked up. MAD was just getting traction. And kids would roll their Jeep. Brett Weinstein, great kid, rolled his Jeep dead. Bobby Mitchell, hit on a moped, late at night, probably fucked up. Now, the death rates aren't down, but it's deaths of despair. They've gone from being drunk to depressed.
Yeah.
And a combination of social and also concierge parenting. And I made an incorrect assumption about you. I don't know your approach to parenting, but I can just see what's happened to me. I love my kids. I want to.
Yeah. We want to make it all good for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give them everything, and I have the resources and the ability now, and I'm kind of all over them and know what they're doing. I'm following them on TikTok and on Snap. And
How old are your two kids?
I started late. I have 11 and 14-year-old
Yeah, me
boys.
too. I have little ones also. At least you don't have girls. It's so brutal watching my 15-year-old, watching her on, just show me on, oh, look at this girl and look at this girl. And everybody's curated, perfected visual appearance. And it's the devil. I mean, it's painful. It really is. It's not as brutal with boys, but it's devastating.
Well, boys bully physically and verbally. Girls bully relationally. And we have put these nuclear weapons in their hands in the form of phones. And, when I think a lot about big tech, and I think about in 10 years, what will we look back on and regret most? And we'll regret that we let them weaponize our elections. We'll regret misinformation around vaccines. We'll regret that we let them grow so big that a lot of great companies never got out of the crib because they would use their dominance, their anti-monopoly behavior to kind of overrun weak regulatory institutions. But I think the thing we will absolutely regret the most, Donny, is I think we will look back on this era and think, how did we let this happen to our kids? And what I encourage everyone our age that didn't grow up with social media to contemplate is imagine being faced with your full self. Imagine being presented with your full self 24/7.
Yeah.
You never get to leave the high school cafeteria.
That's it. There's no safe haven anymore. Even if you were a kid that had a tough time at school, you came home to a safe place where you got to turn it off. And there is no safe haven anymore.
I was my senior year in high school, or my junior year, I was 5'10", 120 pounds with really bad acne. But I got to come home and my mom thought I was the bomb.
Yeah.
I was a decent athlete and I'd go get some self-esteem there. And I got to go home and just watch TV and escape from all of it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you're a girl either bullying or being bullied? It never gets turned off. And what we're seeing is we're just seeing the percentage of the number of admittances to hospital for self-harm. This is girls cutting themselves is up 80%. So I think we're going to look back on this. I said this on CNN and I got a ton of shit and Jimmy Fallon made fun of me on late night TV. I'd rather my 15-year-old son, I'd rather give him a pound of marijuana and a bottle of Jack than social media.
I don't disagree.
I think it's less dangerous.
I don't disagree. So how do we put some of that toothpaste?
Girls.
How do we put some problems are Rubik's Cubes and you go, how do we put that toothpaste back in the tube? How do you, this thing now is an attachment. It's a limb for young people.
Right.
So how do we get some sanity back? Well, what's the answer? We know the problem. What's the solution?
I think this is a similar to alcohol and drunk driving. I do think it's a fixable thing. I think parents have to take some responsibility and really understand what their kids are doing online and make sure they have an open dialogue. And it's a little bit harder because when your kid is coming home fucked up, he's fucked up when he walks in the door and he's drunk. You don't know what they're doing in their room on their phone. You don't know who's bullying or being bullied. But I do think you have to be very conscious, especially with girls, what is going on in social media with them. Two, I think that the government plays a role. We age gate marijuana, porn, the military, alcohol. Why? I see no reason that a 14-year-old should be allowed on Instagram. I just see no reason that we shouldn't be age gating. I think we should be holding these companies accountable. If you could reverse engineer this podcast to teen depression and teen suicide, we'd be in a world of hurt. We'd be, and yet they're able to reverse engineer social media to teen depression and teen suicide. And somehow these companies have managed to be exonerated from any legal liability because of Section 230 and a bunch of other things. So age gating, legal liability, and I think parents have to take some responsibility for what their kids are doing online. But I think I think that social media and these companies benefit from this bereft notion or narrative that these problems are too big to solve, that we just have to live with them. I don't think the world is what it is. I think the world is what we make of it. We can absolutely solve these problems.
Would you change 230? Which basically for viewer listeners out there is just, it gives immunity to the social media companies that broadcast companies and cable companies don't have, that they're not responsible for what's on their platforms.
That's right. So the basic premise that we get wrong is people think it's a moderation and a content problem. And it leads us to this unproductive argument around First Amendment and free speech. It's not the content that's posted on these platforms that is the problem. It's what content gets elevated.
It's the algorithms.
And that's right. And so an algorithm says, okay, here's someone who says that the Moderna vaccine alters your DNA. And a lot of people weigh in and say, oh yeah, that's true. I started having rashes when I got the vaccine. And then people move in and say, no, you shouldn't be saying this. That's entirely wrong. And it creates hundreds, if not thousands of comments. Every comment is an impression, which is another Nissan ad, which is more shareholder value. So the algorithms, which are benign, go, whatever causes engagement, we love and we'll elevate that content. And the content that really inspires engagement is enragement. And so what we have are algorithms and financial incentives that encourage a discourse to become more coarse and also elevate misinformation. The dissenter's voice, the anti-vaxxers, should absolutely be on Facebook. The people who believe in the conspiracies should have a voice, because occasionally conspiracies aren't conspiracies. They end up being true. The problem is most of this content gets far more sunlight than it would get on its own because the algorithms love misinformation. Mm-hmm. So I think what would I do with 230? I would say once content is elevated algorithmically beyond its organic reach, Section 230 protections go away because it's no longer the individual posting it. It's you, the organization, posting it, meaning you have to take responsibility for it once you elevate it.
So if you're advising Elon Musk right now, and do we put Trump back on or not on Twitter?
Well, first off, I mean, there's a lot there. I have a bias against Elon Musk. He calls me names on Twitter,
I know,
so I don't like the
man.
man.
You had a good comeback when you called him pedo boy or whatever it was. So I thought that was pretty good.
Well, he told me I was an insufferable numbskull. And be clear, I am not insufferable. But so... I mean, my 11-year-old son came home the next day and was very serious. Never talks to me when he comes home. Usually heads to the video games. He comes in and goes, Dad, what's a numbskull? Like, it got back to my 11-year-old.
Really?
Look, I don't think the Twitter acquisition is going to close. I think if Twitter didn't have this offer, it'd be trading at $20. And now that Tesla stock is going down, his bank account is going down, which he's going to have to increasingly margin. And he's basically bought something that is now worth 40% less. People think he's bought the company. He hasn't. He spent $1 billion for an option to buy it at $54 a share. And guess what, Donny? He's not going to exercise that option. I don't think Elon Musk is going to own Twitter. Having said that, if he does in fact operate Twitter, I think that you should probably put an ex-president back on. But if he continues to spread election misinformation, I think you kick him off again. I think it's pretty simple. And this bullshit notion that this has anything to do with First Amendment is that the government shall pass no law that inhibits free speech. It doesn't mean anything for private companies. And when you have a guy using a platform, I mean, when they kicked President Trump off the platform, election misinformation went down somewhere between 30 and 40%. That is a smart move for a private company. And by the way, they want accolades for it. They kicked him off 11 days after he lost the election. They deserve no credit for that bold move. But I think eventually you put the president back on with conditions. It says, okay, if you continue to spread lies based on how much oxygen they get, as a private company, we will make the decision that we have not only obligations to shareholders, but we have obligations to the Commonwealth. And if you continue to spread this big lie, we're going to kick you off again. Maybe it's not permanent, but we're going to kick you off. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Speaking of the big lie, and I talk a lot about this on television, and I don't think people are worried enough at how the precipice of our democracy and how fragile it is right now. It's something we've all grown up entitled to, assumed was there. And, if not for just one or two or three brave individuals in the last election, they would have stolen it. They would have voted if you didn't have a Brad Raffensperger, if you didn't have somebody in Pennsylvania. And right now, the state legislatures are set up in certain states where they can take the results of the election. They can bring them into their own hands. And we are really on the precipice. I'd love your take on that.
Well, I've seen you talk about this, I think on Morning Joe, and I thought Bill Maher's piece on this was really chilling. Look, I think it all comes down to when you think about how to build a better America, I think most or many of our biggest problems come down to one thing, and that is because of gerrymandering and because of a primary election system. We're just sending our leaders are just whack jobs from the left and right.
Yeah.
That the majority of America is somewhere in the middle.
I couldn't
agree. The majority
with you
of
more.
America believes in the right to choice, but within certain limits. They're not no abortion all the time. They're not unfettered access to abortion in in the third trimester. The majority of people are somewhere in the middle.
On most things. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm with you. I'm a raging moderate. I know you call yourself
That's
that.
exactly the term I use. I'm a raging moderate. And I'm left of center. I'm left of center, left of center. Most of my friends are left of center, right? Whatever it might be. And we have a primary system
that rewards the opposite.
I'll give you an example. Yeah. I've gotten a lot of shit for this. I'm friends with Mehmet Oz. Mm-hmm. I'm personal friends with him. I don't know him well, but I know him. I know him and his wife. The Mehmet running for office now is not the Mehmet I know.
No.
I know Mehmet.
It's a creation that you have to play to that distinct far right.
And here's the thing.
That's it.
Here's the
success.
thing.
That's it. That's the only success model.
Mehmet is really smart. And he realizes the only way I can get in office, I actually think Mehmet's a moderate. The guy I've known for 20 years is a moderate. And you have to be so batshit crazy to be elected in your primary that we are sending Ted Cruz in the squad. No one else.
Yeah.
And the reason why a woman's right to choice is being threatened is the Democrats mistakenly will say, this will outrage everybody and we'll win more Senate seats. Well, here's the bottom line. Throughout 90% of history, Republicans have somewhere between 45 and 55 Senate seats. The key to all this is occasionally we got to send a Lisa Murkowski. We got to send some moderate Republicans and some moderate Democrats that can get together and say, do we really want to take away a woman's right to choice here? Because all we needed was 2 or 3 moderates to say to these justices, your views on choice are really uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had 1 or 2 or 2 of the 3 of these justices be approved if we'd had just a few moderate Republicans. But we have now minority rule in the United States where it's either far left or far right, and their job is to inflame and enrage each other. And it's we don't have a democracy right now. We have minority rule.
I hear you. Hey, Scott, you've been so generous with your time. Final question, and it's been a privilege talking to you. I love your mind, and we could talk for 20 hours. Final question. What's the Scott Galloway brand?
Oh, I think about this a lot. On my tombstone, I wanted to say generous, dad, and patriot.
Love that. You know what's great about a guy like you is most people, they flummox with that. I ask that question of everybody. It's kind of what the show is about. And most people just hesitate. Well, that's not a brand. You just walked right into it. So a man very in touch with who he is. Scott, appreciate it. Continued success. Really, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, likewise, Donny. I appreciate your time. Congrats on all your success.
Thanks, buddy. You stay well, okay? Hope you enjoyed today's podcast and our interview with Professor Galloway and our brands of the week. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe anywhere you get podcasts. Apple, Spotify, any place else. Rate or review or subscribe. And you can watch our videos on YouTube. And please subscribe there and also leave your comments. And have a great week. We'll see you next week on Our Brand. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button.
And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.